I couldn't forget that night. The Apache woman said to the cowboy who had saved her years ago. The desert wind whispered across the plains like an old spirit remembering the past, carrying with it the lingering scent of mesquite smoke and sun-warmed stone. The Apache woman, Nayeli, rode, her chestnut mare along the familiar trail carved between the crimson bluffs, her braids brushing against her shoulders as she guided the horse to the one place she hadn't dared return to for 7 long years. Her heart pulsed with a mixture of dread and longing as she reached the ravine, the same place where everything had changed, where the night sky had burned with danger, and a cowboy she'd barely known had risked everything to save her. And now she repeated the words she had practiced in silence so many times. I couldn't forget that night. The memory pulled at her like gravity, a memory carved into her spirit as deeply as petroglyphs carved into canyon walls. The wind shifted, and she heard the distant sound of a hammer striking metal, a rhythmic clink unlike anything in the wild terrain. She knew immediately who it belonged to: Wyatt, the cowboy with the dust-colored eyes and a heart that beat like a storm trapped behind a ribcage. She guided her mare toward the sound and found him outside a weathered barn he'd built, with his own hands, wood polished by sun and time. He stood with his back to her at first, broad shoulders wrapped in a blue checkered shirt, his black hat tipped low as he worked on a broken stirrup. She didn't dismount at once. Instead, she watched him, absorbing the detail of him that had lived in her, memory far longer than she'd ever intended. It wasn't until her mare snorted softly that Wyatt lifted his head and turned. His eyes widened, not with fear, not with shock, but with something softer, something he'd hidden well. Nayeli, he said, breath caught like he didn't trust himself. Is it really you? She nodded and felt heat sting her chest. It's me. I've come back. He wiped his hands on a rag, moving slowly toward her as though any sudden step would break the fragile reality between them. When she dismounted, her boots touched the ground with the quiet thud of a long journey ending. They stood close, closer than strangers should, but farther than people who once shared a single night that changed both their worlds. That night, the one she'd never spoken of to anyone, the one he had tried to forget. I thought you were gone for good, Wyatt murmured, his voice low and warm, like the barn lantern on a winter night. After what happened, Nayeli's pulse quickened. That's why I came back, she said, taking a breath that trembled with old ghosts. I couldn't forget that night, Wyatt. I tried. Spirit's witness, I tried. But it stayed with me. He took off his hat, a gesture of respect, and held it against his chest. I never forgot either. For a moment, silence settled around them, thick as desert dusk. The horses shifted in their stalls. Birds chattered somewhere high in the rafters, and sunlight filtered through the slatted barn walls, painting them in golden stripes like spirits blessing the reunion. Nayeli remembered every detail of the night she'd nearly lost her life. The renegade riders who ambushed her camp, the wild chase through the canyon, the moment she dismounted to fight, only to be overwhelmed. And then Wyatt charging in on a dapple gray stallion, firing warning shots, yanking her onto his saddle, his arm wrapped around her as they thundered through the darkness. She remembered his heartbeat against her back as they hid in a cave until dawn, the way he whispered calm into her trembling fear, the quiet promise he made. I won't let anything happen to you. But dawn had brought more than safety. It brought choice. Her tribe needed her. He couldn't follow, and she couldn't stay. Now, years later, the air between them thrummed again with all those unspoken words. Wyatt finally broke the stillness. What happened after you left? She exhaled slowly. Life continued. My people rebuilt. I trained to become a protector. But even with all that, the memory of you never left me. The admission hung heavily, boldly, vulnerably. Wyatt's jaw tightened with emotion he didn't hide. You saved me that night too, Nayeli. If I hadn't found you, I don't know what I would have become. You gave me something to fight for. She stepped even closer, feeling his breath mingle with hers. I came back because I need to know if that night was just survival or something more, something worth remembering. He swallowed hard. You deserve honesty. And the truth is, I never stopped wondering about you. Every sunset, every trail ride, every quiet night, your face came back to me. A warmth bloomed in her chest, like a dawn rising over sacred land. Then maybe, she whispered, it's time to stop wondering. Wyatt reached up, gently touching her cheek with a rough but tender hand, fingers trembling just enough to reveal the truth he'd kept hidden. I waited for this day, he said softly. Didn't think it'd ever come. Nayeli leaned into his touch, eyes drifting closed. It came, she breathed, because I couldn't forget that night. And I don't want to forget this one either. As the sun dipped lower, casting molten gold across the barn floor, the past loosened its grip, and a new story began, one built not on fear and escape, but on return, truth, and the undeniable pull of two souls who had unfinished business with fate. Night came quietly, with the sky unfolding into a blanket of indigo and scattered stars. But inside the barn, the air hummed, with the unspoken electricity left between Nayeli and Wyatt. After their reunion, they had walked together through the tall grass behind the barn, letting the last scraps of sunset fade into embers. Neither spoke at first. The silence wasn't empty, but full. Every glance, every shared breath, every small brush of their hands speaking far louder than words ever could. When they reached the old wooden fence overlooking the valley, Nayeli rested her arms atop the sun-worn rail, her braids swaying gently as the desert wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. She stared into the horizon, remembering the path that led her here. Wyatt stood beside her, hat in hand, watching her with the same steady gaze he'd used the night he rescued her. Firm, protective, quietly anchored in something deeper than he'd ever dared admit. Nayeli, he said finally, voice roughened by emotion he'd tried to hide for years. Why now? After all this time? She didn't turn at first. Instead, she let the stars settle in her eyes. Because I spent years learning who I was, who I needed to be for my people. But every time I thought I'd outrun the past, I realized I hadn't. Your shadow was always there, not haunting, not painful, just unfinished. She looked at him then, her gaze unwavering. And some things don't deserve to be left unfinished. Wyatt exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. I thought about riding out to find you 100 times, he admitted. But I didn't want to disrespect your tribe, or the life you needed to return to. Nayeli's voice softened. You respected me too much to chase me. Or maybe, he said with a sad smile, I was too afraid I'd find out. You'd forgotten me. She reached out and took his hand, strong, calloused, familiar in the way a memory tries desperately not to fade. I couldn't forget you even if I tried, she whispered. Not the way you held on to me that night when everything in the world felt like it was falling apart. Wyatt swallowed, his voice low. The way you leaned on me like I was someone worth trusting. I held on to that for a long time. She squeezed his hand gently. You were worth trusting. You still are. The weight of their shared truth settled between them, warm and grounding. Far off, a coyote howled, its cry echoing through the valley like a spirit song of things long buried rising to the surface. Wyatt turned toward her fully now. Tell me what you came here hoping to find, he said. I'll accept whatever truth you bring. Nayeli stepped closer, her chest nearly brushing his. I came to see if the connection we shared that night when the world was collapsing around us was real, or if it was just two scared souls clinging to each other, because the dark gave us no other choice. Wyatt's eyes softened, deepened. And now? Now, she breathed, I think it was real. More real than anything I've felt since. His heart thudded, loud enough she almost heard it. Then let me say the thing I should have said before you rode away all those years ago. Nayeli felt his fingers brush her cheek, the warmth sending shivers down her spine. Say it, she whispered. He leaned his forehead against hers, breath warm on her lips. I wanted you to stay, the words cracked. Something open in her, something she'd held shut with pride and duty. If you had asked then, she whispered back, I might have. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Then let me ask now. Not To abandon your people, not to give up who you are. Just don't disappear again. Let me be part of your world, even if it's only a piece of it. Nasheli's eyes glistened under the moonlight. I didn't come here to leave again. Wyatt, he cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing her jaw as though memorizing her shape. Then stay with me tonight. Not because of fear or danger or that night we survived together. Stay because you choose me. She didn't hesitate. She stepped into him, letting her forehead rest against his chest as his arms wrapped around her. Firm and safe, the same way they had in the cave 7 years ago, but this time without fear, without urgency. Only choice, only longing, only truth. I choose you, she whispered into his shirt, the words sinking into him like rain into dry earth. Wyatt held her tighter, his voice cracking with relief. I've waited so damn long to hear you say that. They remained like that for a long while, wrapped together beneath the rising moon. Two souls, finally allowed to breathe in the same rhythm. When they returned to the barn later, the lanterns cast a soft amber glow across the wooden stalls, and everything around them felt touched by something sacred, something once postponed, now finally embraced. Wyatt brushed a strand of hair from her face. That night changed us, he said. But this one might heal us? Nayeli smiled gently. Then let's not waste it. The air between them warmed again, not with rush or desperation, but with a slow, powerful certainty that fate had brought them back, together for a reason neither could deny. And as they stood there, two hearts finally aligned after years of distance, their story truly began.